Hey fellow road trippers, buckle up and ride along on our campervan adventure through northern Arizona and the Utah playground. Over the course of 9 days and 1,400 miles, we fully exploited the use of our home on wheels to see some of the wonders of the West. We started in Las Vegas, which unfortunately was fairly dead considering it was the height of the global pandemic. We wandered around, gambled a bit, but we were fairly ready to hit the road the next morning. We then went over to the Escape Campervan's office, which wasn't too far from the city center, where we met our home for the next 9 days, the Green Monster. Originally, we planned a one-way trip from Las Vegas to San Francisco, but there were a ton of wildfires up and down the Sierra Nevadas that made us reconsider our route. Our friend Ryan highly recommended a few spots in Utah, so we modified our trip to a loop with a few planned spots and decided the rest along the way. First stop, the Grand Canyon. We spent the night in the North Khabib Forest, which was about 20 minutes north of the Grand Canyon, and the next morning set out for the North Rim. At the North Rim, there's a really cool hike from the visitor center that takes you right up to the edge of the canyon. Heading towards Lake Powell, we made a few pit stops along the way, including accidentally scaring a few deer into the road. Don't worry, they survived. We drove past Vermillion Cliffs, over the Colorado River, and made a final pit stop at Horseshoe Bend. Horseshoe Bend had a small parking fee, but it was only about a 10-minute walk from the parking lot to the valley. I displayed my gallant bravery by looking over the edge towards the river. We set up camp at Lone Rock Beach at Lake Powell, which kind of felt like a NASCAR race with all the campers along the water, so we found a spot with some more privacy. The next day we spent most of our time on the paddleboards exploring the small coves and moon-like topography on the opposite shore. That afternoon we left Lake Powell heading towards East Utah, driving through Monument Valley on the way. We settled into a dispersed campsite at Twin Peaks that night before heading to Moab the next morning. Moab is an outdoor adventure enthusiast playground. It's a small town located in the middle of the desert with a lot of restaurants, shops, cafes, and it's surrounded on all sides by amazing geography and countless trails to explore. We decided to splurge a little and rented an ultra-terrain vehicle and took to the trails. And then, not even an hour into the trail, we find ourselves climbing up yet another mountain. We ended up camping in the desert that night with the UTV, with about 18 hours left on the rental. So we woke up bright and early the next day and headed over across to the other side of Moab to Slick Rock, named after the slick rocks that you drive on. We dropped off the UTV and picked up the camper van. In an effort to see as much as we could, we drove over to Arches National Park. After about 5 days in the desert, we needed a little break from the sand, so we headed towards Fishlake National Forest. Fishlake was a really relaxing midpoint to our trip. I was able to fly fish for a few hours, we paddleboarded twice on the lake, and set up our camp in the Aspens. The season was winding down at the lake, so it was seemingly all ours. We stayed there most of the next day before driving down towards Bryce Canyon. Bryce Canyon National Park is an erosion that's occurred over the last few thousand years, leaving narrow, towering rock spires called hoodoos. There are numerous loop hikes that take you from the top all the way down to the valley, which kept us busy most of the day. The final stop of our trip was Zion National Park. We camped about an hour north of Zion the night before, knowing that there would be no great options close by for dispersed camping. Since we hadn't booked well in advance for any parts of our trip, we weren't able to get tickets for the park, so we did some digging on options to try to get in. All of Zion is a valley, with essentially one access point towards the south. We hiked the Watchman Trail outside of the park for the first half of the day. Finally, we found out about an option where you could wait until 3 p.m. day of, and they'll release a few thousand tickets. We decided to hike the Narrows, which is one of the more notable hikes, where you're actually hiking in a river through this tight canyon right at the end of the valley. we decided to skip the mile-long bus line on the way back and ended up spending the last few hours of sunlight jogging through the park back towards the parking lot at the entrance. Zion was the perfect way to end our 9-day campervan adventure. Thanks for watching.